suicide, etc., and died of carbon monoxide poisoning.
But he died of a heart attack.
Yeah, I know, but maybe I don't know. I'm
But
not a doctor. I don't know.
But why was he even?
Why was he on the pile? Well, that's a good question. Well, there's that. There's also on the site later, and nobody got sick or noticed any ill effects from gas or anything like that.
Well, also he was on the top of the pile. He wasn't like stuck in a room with CO2 like he could have been feeling like faint and then just turned over and everything would have been fine.
There is that too. There is a question of there was plenty of other air wafting through the area, so I don't see how he could have. So this is again. I think I also saw this one out on Reddit. So Reddit, you're not doing so well today. I got to tell you guys. Usually you guys are more on your game than this. But the theory is out there, so I just had to include it. And again, I just think it fails on a few fronts.
Yeah.
And there's another one. This was kind of like hypothesized by the police at the time, which is there was a misadventure with a coal truck.
Actually, aside from the fact that we've already talked about, there were no actual deliveries.
There were no deliveries
on those days.
that day. Yeah.
I do like this theory a lot.
Oh yeah, this makes a lot. This makes on the outside made a lot of sense.
It makes all of the sense.
Until it fell
explains
apart.
everything.
Yeah,
almost.
except it does. And the theory was that somehow Sigmund fell or jumped or was pushed into the back of a coal truck, which eventually delivered its load of coal to the Tomlin coal yard with Sigmund in the coal. But of course, Trevor Parker shot the theory down because he said, well, there were no coal deliveries to the yard on that day, nor the day before, nor the day before that. So much for that idea.
It also, I guess, the other thing is it does seem like he would be more covered in coal.
Yeah, he'd have more coal dust.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be
a little dirtier.
They'd be dirtier.
Yeah, there's that.
He looked like a chimney sweep at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it still doesn't explain how the hell he winds up in the back of a coal truck, by the way. There's that one, too. Another theory that I was kicking around a little bit is, well, he worked at the coal pit a few miles east, and then 22 miles east of Todd Borden. And, of course, the coal pit was served by rail. So what if, for whatever reason, he had to go to the coal pit? Something happens. Maybe it's something kind of like our Dave Box episode where the guy is like, whistleblower, God knows whatever reason, and he's murdered or something at work, and so they just toss him into a rail car that's full of coal, and then it goes off, by rail to Todd Borden, where somebody there, pulls the body out and puts it on the pile. Mm-hmm. But I checked it out, and there does not appear to be a direct rail connection between the Loft House coal pit and Todd Borden rail station.
Well, also he was gone for 5 days, and I thought it turned out that he had died
the day of.
The day of.
I know. Well, they held him prisoner at the coal pit.
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
But fed him really well and shaved him and stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I was thinking like he could have gotten in the coal truck by hitching a ride. Like maybe he was a little lazy, and he saw a friend of his and he was like, oh, I'm going to buy some potatoes. Can you give me a lift to the store? I'll just hop on the back here, and somehow fell in or something. I don't know.
And a friend forgot he was there and just delivered him.
Yeah, or he didn't even tell somebody.
I don't know. I don't know either.
But again, it doesn't really account for the 5 missing days. So.
Yeah, it does not account for that. And again, it's like, well, also, it doesn't account for how high up the body was. I mean, your average, even if it's a dump truck and everything, it's kind of hard to imagine the body winding up that high up on being dumped on the pile. I mean, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's, and I don't think they had rail delivery either to the yard, because if they had rail delivery, which would make sense, kind of, it's right next to the railroad track, but they would kind of have to have a separate rail spur.
I was going to say, I don't remember a spur going into the yard.
I looked at the aerials, and usually, if a spur is totally not being used anymore, they will sometimes take up the tracks. Mm-hmm. But you can usually tell there's evidence left behind in the aerials that you can usually sort of see.
Right.
And there's no evidence of a spur there.
Okay, well, we put the kibosh on that.
So much for that theory. There's another theory. This is kind of more plausible, that he was kidnapped. Yeah. Sigmund's family actually believed he had been kidnapped, and as I mentioned earlier, there was some bad blood apparently between him and another member of the extended family. This theory comes to us from Bufora, the British UFO Research Association.
Bufora.
Bufora, not Bufora. Okay, Bufora. About 10 years ago, team members of Bufora looked into Sigmund's death. They wrote a report about it, which you can find on the web if you look hard enough. And I have a copy of it right here.
It's not that hard.
No, it's not that hard to find. It's got pictures and everything. And I've read it anyway, so you don't have to. Don't worry about finding it. The authors of the report are John Hansen and David Sankey. And they actually did, I think, a fairly decent report. You guys read it, right?
Yeah.
And it was not sensationalist at all.
Very straightforward.
Very straightforward. They researched it as well as they could, and came to a reasonable conclusion. So the authors tried to get a hold of police and coroner's records. Of course, they were given the runaround. They did interview Alan Godfrey, the policeman, since he was there. He'd be an obvious choice. And that was when they got the quote from him saying it was loaded rubbish. They also spoke to a few members of Sigmund's family, and they concluded UFOs were not involved. The report mentions one person who was unnamed who told UFO researchers that what had happened was that Sigmund had had a falling out with a member of the family recently. Apparently another member of the family, who was a female, had left her husband, who was a person that he had a falling out with, gotten a restraining order against him.
The husband.
Against the husband, and was staying with Sigmund and Lottie temporarily. And so probably the husband is the family member that Bufora mentions. And they state that his identity is known, but they don't give us his name, and I assume they do that for legal reasons.
I would assume
Which
so.
makes sense. Which kind of makes sense, yeah. So the allegation is that this person, and again, this is allegation, this is not just a theory on their part, somebody else alleged this, who apparently was supposed to be in the know, but we don't know who he is, damn it. But the allegation is that this husband abducted Sigmund, locked him in a garden shed for several days, and Sigmund was trying to escape and somehow came into contact with battery acid or some other kind of corrosive agent which caused the burns on his neck and shoulders. But then apparently Sigmund died, and then whoever was holding him had to get rid of his body. And this does get a little support from Lottie Adamski, who was Sigmund's wife, who said after Sigmund disappeared, before his body appeared, that she believed that he had been kidnapped. It does leave some questions unanswered, like for one, what could his kidnapper or kidnappers have hoped to accomplish by kidnapping him and locking him up in a shed for several days?
I have one idea.
What's that? Just stopping him from attending the wedding?
No, I was thinking that if it is the estranged husband, this husband, I mean, Sigmund and his wife had a thing going on the side, and that's why she left him and went to live with them.
Yeah.
And so he's going to get revenge on this bastard for fooling around with my wife.
Or Sigmund seemed like, sorry.
No.
It seems like he was kind of a paternal figure for the family. I mean, he was going to, give his goddaughter away, and, maybe it's that this guy was like, well, Sigmund's the only thing keeping me away from my wife. It doesn't even have to be some sort of relationship thing. It can literally be like, he's the man of this house. Maybe he had a shotgun and said, listen, you come near your, estranged wife again, I'll shoot you. And, the guy thinks, all right, well, I'll just kidnap him and then I have easy access to my wife. And surely she'll be coming running back to me because she'll see the error of her ways. And then it turns out, no, maybe not.
Well, and I think the estranged husband, was he the one that was supposed to be giving away the goddaughter at the wedding, but couldn't because of the restraining order? Does that sound familiar?
I could have been that. Well, now, again, it's another unnamed person. Apparently, there was somebody else who Sigmund felt was actually the person who should have been giving away the goddaughter instead of him.
Okay, so...
And so there was some contention. I don't know if they were the same person or not, because, again, another unnamed person drives me crazy.
Well, I guess I have a couple of questions regarding a kidnapping, right? One is they said he was, well-fed.
Yeah.
And I don't know, do you well-feed and hydrate and
My
give
captives?
all the creature comforts to your captives that you have hidden up in your sheds?
No.
It depends.
Isn't the point of kidnapping to make it kind of miserable for that person?
You would think, yeah.
So that...
It depends on what I tend to do with them. Sometimes I starve them, sometimes I don't.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's a problem I have too. Usually there would be ligature marks around writs or some other
Well, you
way
would think
where-
it would be otherwise restrained, because
Yeah.
the average garden shed is not that stout,
No.
and so you'd think you'd want to tie them up. And I didn't read about any sort of handcuff marks or rope marks or anything like that.
Yeah, so I don't know.
So maybe he was kept kind of in a semi-drug state also, maybe.
Possible.
Again, I mean, even if that's right, even if this particular person abducts him and has him in the garden shed, why the coal pile? Why not just go, oh, well, he's dead in my backyard shed. Why don't I go next to the shed, dig a big hole and cram him into it.
There's that.
And just dispose of the body that way.
I can think of many, many lower profile ways to get rid of a body.
Wood chippers.
Even if you drive them out in the woods and just push them into the creek, you're still at least a lot less likely to get seen.
Into the ocean? Yeah, I mean, there's a whole, but that's why...
Driving 22 miles with a body, or 20 miles with a body in the back of your car.
Yeah, well, it might not have been 20 miles. I don't know where this guy lived. He might have actually lived near Todd Morton.
Fair enough, yeah.
I don't know, but...
yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, it's really inexplicable.
I wonder if this was a Weekend at Bernie's kind of scenario, how they got there. They actually got there on the train. They went next to the stop, and so the guy was carrying him around, with the arm at the back of his shirt, turning his head around like he's talking to him.
Yeah, I had big sunglasses
and then they
on.
Do that three-legged walk into the coal yard.
Yeah,
that's not how that happened, probably.
Let's go to the top of the coal yard and have a look around. But yeah, one of the things about this that's really kind of intriguing to me is that Sigmund was a coal miner, and his body was found on a pile of coal. And so it makes me wonder if somebody was maybe sending a message. I don't know what the message
I don't
was.
know either. And why it wouldn't be, why they wouldn't have just dropped him at the coal mine where he worked instead of this coal stockpile somewhere else.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Again, maybe the coal mine was all full of people. Maybe this yard and everything was actually a pretty sleepy little place, and there weren't that many people around. Todd Morton is a tiny little village. Yeah. But I just don't understand. But it could just be a coincidence that he was found in a pile of coal. I don't know. It just seems to me that there's something going on there. Like, was there a little labor unrest down at the mine, and maybe management decided to grab some random coal miner and murder him and drop him on a pile of coal just to send a message?
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know. And then there was the Lofthouse Collier disaster of 1973, which I'm sure you guys have heard about.
Yeah.
Who hasn't?
Who hasn't?
Yeah. Long story short, somebody kind of dropped the ball, and part of the mine was flooded. Yeah,
That was a giant cock-up.
It really was. And but without getting into great detail, unless you guys wanted to get into great detail.
No.
Okay.
Government official did not do the proper survey job.
Yeah, and so the mine was, or at least part of it was flooded with about 3 million gallons of water. 7 miners died, and of course there was a bit of a stink about the whole thing.
Yeah, quite a big stink. Political career was made off of it.
And died off of it too. So could maybe Sigmund have somehow been involved in this disaster? Did somebody kidnap him as part of some sort of revenge plot? Or am I just grasping at straws?
I think that one.
Yeah, probably that one. Yeah, I mean that might sort of indicate the significance of his body winding up on top of a coal pile. But beyond that, I got nothing.
I don't either.
Yeah, I really don't. I just thought it was kind of intriguing that there was this big disaster at where he worked, and then he turns up dead on a pile of coal.
Yeah, but the disaster happened seven years
Before.
prior.
Yeah, I was saying, and there was no anniversary or anything like that.
They do. They hold things to recognize.
Well, no, I mean, but his disappearance and death were not on any kind of anniversary of the disaster.
Okay. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right.
So again, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to me.
Mm-mm.
But that was another significant event, a coal-oriented event in the neighborhood. So I thought I sort of had to ponder for a second whether there might be a connection, but I really can't think of one.
Yeah, I can't either.
Yeah.
I think this is just an all-around a very weird story, and it's one of those ones that I hate because I don't feel like I feel any different or anything like that.
Any closer to an actual resolution.
Yeah, it's
I know.
There's not a favored theory.
No,
there's not.
No, there's nothing that quite explains everything. Even the most plausible one, which is a kidnapping and being held against his will.
There's still so many questions.
There's still that question of why the coal pile? What the hell?
Why the coal pile is even in the UFO theory? Come on.
Yeah, I know. Why would the UFO go to a train station which has got people around it and everything and drop the body there?
Because I'm telling you, because it looked like it was a really cushy place to drop him.
That must have been it. I don't know.
By the way, did you guys read? There was one of those news articles from the time in the newspaper, and they had your traditional flying saucer in the air, and then there's this line drawing of coal underneath, and then in between the two is this silhouette of a body in falling position. It was so funny. I was like, wow, at this point they were just having fun with this.
Well, you'd have to.
Oh yeah, actually I've always thought that actually working for the tabloids and writing some of those articles and headlines would actually be kind of a kick.
Probably.
It'd probably be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, but unfortunately, we got to leave it at that because I don't know. There might be somebody out there who's still alive who still has the answers. I don't know. At least one person, I think, does.
Maybe you can help us solve this
Yes,
mystery.
if you're listening, yeah, give us a ring, drop us an email. Speaking of email, you might just want to send us one, and well, we happen to have one of those email addresses. It's called thinkingsidewayspodcast@gmail.com.
True.
Yeah, this is the end of the episode, by the way, in case you hadn't caught on to that. Let's see what else. Gosh, so many things. We have a website, thinkingsidewayspodcast.com. You can download our episodes or listen to them there. You can find merch. There's a link up to the right. And there, you can also find our episodes in other places. You can find them on iTunes, of course, where you can subscribe, give us a rating, and review. And also, of course, there's other places like Stitcher and streaming services all over the place. We're also on social media. We have a Twitter account where we are Thinking Sideways, no G.
True.
And we're
And
on
tag,
Facebook.
tag us. Don't hashtag us because I don't see those hashtags, guys.
Oh, okay. So tag, no hashtag.
Yeah.
Okay. You heard that? Did you hear that? Okay, good. And then we're, of course, on Facebook, where we're Thinking Sideways Podcast. And we have a group and a page. So like the page, join the group. And the group's fun, a lot of good stuff going on. We got a subreddit of our very own. Yeah, we have a little corner of Reddit all to ourselves.
We do.
It's
true.
Thinking Sideways.
Yeah.
And let's see, what else? What am I forgetting?
Coal miner's daughter?
Oh, yeah, time for a song. Hand me that guitar.
No.
Yeah, I think that's about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think
All
so
right.
too.
All right. Well, until next week, I guess that's it from me and then Stephen Devon. So, toodaloo.
Bye, guys.
Bye! This episode of Thinking Sideways is not brought to you by Screaming Measles, a kazoo band inspired by the bubonic plague. Instead, it's sponsored by Talkspace, the online therapy company that lets you message a licensed therapist from anywhere at any time. Can't imagine fitting another appointment in your life? Well, with Talkspace, therapy is as easy as sending your therapist a message. No commutes, no leaving the office, and no judgments. To match with a perfect therapist for a fraction of the price of traditional therapy, go to Talkspace.com/sideways and use the code SIDEWAYS to get $45 off your first month and show your support for the show. That's Sideways and Talkspace.com/sideways.
Thinking Sideways. Hi there. Welcome to another episode of Thinking Sideways. I am Joe, joined, as always, by
Steve.
and
Devin.
we've got another cool mystery to talk about this week. We're going to talk about the very strange death of prosecutor Jonathan Luna.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting case, this one.
It really, it's a twisty, turny one for what appears to be so simple on the outside.
Yeah, it's still confounding people 15 years later. The case is still open. There's still a reward out for information. Before I get into our story, though, I want to just give a shout-out to our listeners. Several people suggested this, including Robert, Stan, Judith, and Monique, and probably a few others.
Always.
We've had it on our radar for a long time here at TSP HQ. So let's start our story. Our story begins on the morning of Thursday, December 4th, 2003, 5:30 a.m. Jonathan Luna, federal prosecutor, was found dead in a ditch in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, just south of the Pennsylvania Turnpike. His body was face down in a very small creek. He had been stabbed 36 times with a small knife and also had what was described as a traumatic wound on the right side of his head.
Yeah.
So, okay, there we go. We got
So
our
theories.
body. Yeah, theories, exactly.
We
Somebody's
are
in a
now in
hurry.
competition for who can do the shortest thing before we get to theories.
Yeah.
Joe won.
We are. Okay, before we start telling all the great gory details, I want to talk a little bit about Jonathan Luna. He was 38 years old, an assistant U.S. attorney at the Baltimore, Maryland office. He was married. His wife was a doctor. They had been married for 10 years. They had 2 kids. They had a townhouse in a suburb just southwest of Baltimore. And Luna was actually kind of from humble beginnings. He was born and raised in the South Bronx, New York, kind of a tough neighborhood. And but he was always kind of bookish and into school, unlike a lot of his classmates, and got himself through law school, passed the bar, had several different attorney jobs until he got this, what I have heard is a really good job at the U.S. Attorney's Office. Apparently, it's considered to be a great opportunity.
It's pretty high up the ladder.
It is, yeah. So he'd done well for himself, considering where he came from. So he'd been doing that job for several years, but unfortunately, it all came to an end on